Hello class. Today we're going to review our treble clef and bass clef staff notes. If you remember, treble clef is actually a fancy G. It tells us that the second to the bottom line is going to be a G. Bass clef is a fancy F. It tells us that any note on this second to the top line of his staff is going to be an F. And if you could tell, the G just loops around that second line, and the bass clef has a big dot on its line, it tells us. Now, all of your instruments that are high, like the flute or the trumpet, they're actually going to use a treble clef staff only. And your low instruments, like tuba or cello, they're going to use just a bass clef staff. But instruments that have both high and low notes, they're going to be having the treble clef and the bass clef staff. And when we have the two together, we put a brace in front of them to let us know that we're reading both of the staves at the same time. Our musical alphabet is A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And so we just sing A, B, C, D, E, F, and G and then repeat those over and over again. And so it's always from bottom to top. Our bass clef bottom line happens to be a G. And so the note above G in this bottom space is going to be A and B on the second line, C on the second space, D, third line, E, third space, F on that F line, G is on the top space of the bass clef staff, and then A on the top line of the bass clef staff. Now, there are some other notes right here we're going to get to in just a second, but let's skip up to the treble clef. Again, treble clef is a fancy G. Let's skip down to the bottom line of that staff, which is actually E, and then we have F, G on the G line. Above that is A on the second space, B on the third line, C, D, E, with the top line being F. Now, sometimes you're going to go above F. If we do, the note above the staff would be a G, and if we need above G, we're going to add a line, and that would be an A. The line is called a ledger line, and we can add the ledger lines above the staff or below the staff, and we can have as many as you need theoretically. We don't see too many because there's a certain point we can use another device called 8VA where we could notate it down an octave, and so that way we just know it's up an octave. But we'll get to that later. If I had a note above this A, it'd be B, and then two ledger lines up would be C. And if you wanted to do a D above that, you could do a D above that, and so forth. Do the same thing below the staff. You could have F right here below the staff. And then below that, on the first ledger line below the staff would be E. Below the E would be D. And two ledger lines below the bass clef staff would be C. Take a note. C is two ledger lines below the staff, two ledger lines above the staff. Second space from the bottom. It's also second space from the top. C is a very important note because it actually happens to be in the middle between the two staffs. So we call this middle C. A lot of my students believe that middle C is called middle C because it's in the middle of the piano, but he really isn't. The two notes that are actually directly in the middle of the piano are this E and this F. There's 88 keys on the piano, so it's an even number. There's going to be two notes that are sharing the middle. And it's this E and this F. So C is not in the middle of the piano. These are the middle between the treble clef and the bass clef staffs. Above the C would be D. Of course, the bottom line is E. Below the C would be B. Now, let's talk about the middle notes real fast, because sometimes, like if you're playing piano and your right hand is playing the treble clef and your left hand is usually playing the bass clef. What did I say? Right hand's playing treble clef, left hand's playing bass clef. Sometimes your right hand might want to go down below middle C and play some notes below that. Or the left hand might want to come up and play some notes above middle C. So we can do that. It's not like, it's not a wall there. You can cross over if you need to. And so if you're, say your left hand wants to come up and play the D, what they would do is they draw the middle C line. They would draw the ledger line, the middle C line, and then they would have the note notated above the line. And then they would have the stem pointing down to remind you that your left hand is taking care of it. If your right hand wanted to come play B, which would be below the C, it would actually draw the line, and it would have an up stem. Now remember, your stems go up from the back or down from the front. So you can, and of course, you could actually play A if you wanted to. Instead of notating it on the staff, they would actually notate it on ledger lines and have an up stem. Or the left hand can come up and play E. E would be 2 ledger lines up, and of course, it'd be a down stem. That's going to be kind of your clue to help you figure out which hand is playing it for those middle notes. All right, so that kind of confusing. The reason why I specify that is because on the worksheet that you're going to be assigned this week, it actually has some of those internal notes that you kind of need to have to figure out. So just be careful with that. But the worksheet does differentiate that for you. Now, you can remember treble clef being a fancy F, a fancy G, and bass clef being a fancy F. Those are your landmarks. But over the past, long time, music teachers have come up with our own little devices to help us remember our treble clef line notes, space notes, bass clef line notes, and bass clef space notes. So treble clef line notes, just the line notes, we're skipping all the space notes. Treble clef line notes are E, G, B, D, F. And we come up with a fun little sentence to help us remember. It's every good boy does fine. So get out your hand staff. You have 5 lines and 4 spaces on your hand, really. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines and 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. Makes a lot of sense. All right, so bottom line is every good boy does fine. Those are your treble clef line notes. Now that means your space notes are F, A, B, C, D, E. Well, that's convenient. That spells a word, face. Face. And that's going to be F, A, C, F, A, C, E. Now, I like that clue. You can come up with a sentence if you want, but the reason why I like to use face is because it happens to rhyme with space. Face, space. And every good boy does fine rhymes with line. Kind of makes sense, kind of catchy. My favorite one, by the way, that somebody came up with, I can't take credit for this one. That's my favorite. It's every gorgeous babe deserves flowers. That's my favorite one. But, every good boy does fine happens to rhyme with line. Now, to get from treble clef to bass clef, you just chop off the bottom one and you start with the second one. So instead of starting with the E, we're going to start with G. We got good boys do fine always. So we have G, good, B, boys, D, do, F on your F line, and of course your top line is A, always. Now, same thing, chop off the bottom one, start with the second one. So instead of starting with the F, we're going to start with the A. You have A, C, E, of course F, G. So the top space is G. That does not make a word. So we're going to have to make up our own little sentence. Music teachers, we use the sentence of all cows eat grass. But in South Louisiana, we actually come up with our own. We say all Cajuns eat gumbo. But don't get the two confused because Cajuns don't eat grass. Sorry. And I'm sorry, no gumbo. I'm not giving my gumbo to no cow. Sorry, it's not going to happen. So all cows eat grass or all Cajuns eat gumbo. Now remember the 3 middle notes, B, C, and D. So it's every good boy does fine. Every good boy does fine. And F, A, C, E for treble clef. Bass clef, good boys do fine always. And all cows eat grass. All right, if you have any questions, be sure to have your parents text message me or send me an email so that I can help you figure it out. But the worksheet's pretty self-explanatory. All right, have a good week. I'll see you next week.